Welcome back. We're going to talk today a little bit about a tweet that I saw I was interested in. How do you estimate a particular project, feature, or task accurately? Now, there are 1,000 different opinions on this and 1,000 different uh, contexts for which this is, you can say, you can give a correct answer. So, you know, there's no one right answer here, of course, but I think it's definitely a topic that's widely discussed and debated, and there's no right answer to it. But it is interesting to see what other people are doing, and I've changed even my perspective since I started freelancing. I've changed my perspective on this countless times. I started off hourly. I went to a block methodology where I would scope all the features and put that into a development block. I went back to hourly. I've done some hybrid of the two. I've tried to estimate an entire project from beginning to end. There's no perfect way. It all sucks. It's all very subjective, and it's very personality based. There's a lot of personality that influences what happens here. We are talking about this in the development context. I should have mentioned that. Software and app development in particular. But, I imagine that this is, any kind of creative thing. And I do consider development to be a creative process, whether that be from the design standpoint or just the creativity involved in solving problems. That is a creative process, which I think is why it's very difficult to bill by the hour. Some of it's tedious. Some of it's just time-consuming stuff that you can have anyone that has the time to do it. They can probably get it done, but a lot of it is problem solving, and that's a creative process. People think I'm lying when I say that I solve problems in my sleep. I think the solutions to things that I'm stuck on usually come to me in sleep, while I'm sleeping. I mentioned that book, Why We Sleep, a couple times. Awesome book. Some really interesting evidence for what happens when we sleep. Pretty fascinating. My brother turned me on to that. All right, so let's take a look at the tweet. And see if we can't come to some conclusions about this. Okay, so the biggest Zubair. I'm sorry, dude. I'm probably never going to get your name right. But this is the question that he asked. The biggest question bothering me significantly these days: how do I accurately estimate a particular bubble project, feature, task accurately? Now, I know the context in which he's asking this. So let me just set that up because I know Zubair and I know that he develops apps for clients, so he runs his own agency. And my assumption is that he's asking this in the context of somebody who is trying to scope work for clients, and that's somewhere where I've been as well, and it's the same his and I experiences are pretty, they overlap quite a bit. But I think that some of the people that responded here may not be coming from that same context. So that's what I assume he's asking here. But let's see what other people are saying. And see if what kind of overlap in perspective there is here. Okay. So in the he adds here, in the least possible time, doing this in the least possible time. So JJ was the first to respond. This is how we do it. We write product write product requirement documentation, get stakeholder approvals, estimate the project, move on to lo-fi wires, then move on to designs, then dev, allows for early client buy-in resulting in better communication and less scope creep. Okay, so this is a good answer, but it's an answer in a very specific context, right? We're talking about an app that's being built from the ground up, right? It doesn't. It seems like JJ's talking about lo-fi wires and designs, meaning that there isn't anything that exists already. Now, what I find more often than not is that people have already started building their app in Bubble, and then they realize how much work it's going to be, and then they look to an agency for help, basically. So they may already have the designs built. They may already have the documentation needed. So I don't know that all of these steps are necessary in every single context. I think this is more like, first off, I think this is probably like internal, partially internal, right? The stakeholder approvals. It sounds almost like something that you would do internally. And also, it sounds like there's nothing built yet, right? You're starting from zero here, and maybe that was what was Zubair's question, or the original context that he asked him, but maybe not. I have to continually with the I'm only working with one specific client now, and I have to continually estimate what kind of what a new feature is going to be. It's not starting from zero, right? We're building another feature. We discuss what exactly the specs for that feature are, and then I'll say, all right, it's probably going to take me like an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is. But it's not from zero, right? So this process, maybe it's a very informal, shortened version of this process that's happening kind of in the background, but I wouldn't break it out in this way when you're working with a client on an ongoing basis, and you've already got a rapport and you already have an understanding of the app, and there's already features that you're adding on to as opposed to building from zero. So that's my thoughts. That's my thoughts on that specific comment. Conversations are key. I agree with this. The problem with formal consulting is that so many feel the need to document all the conversations, and especially in legal documents. Yeah, I was on a kick on that once too, where I was recording all of the client conversations, mostly because some clients would change what they said they asked for, and then act like, oh no, that's what I told you. So I kind of got into that habit of documenting literally every conversation we had, which I think the better solution there was to just not work with that particular client. Or when clients do that, when they don't even acknowledge that what they told you is different from what they're asking for now, what they originally told you, I think that's probably not the best client to be working with. But I don't think that documenting every conversation, every goddamn word that they say, or having to get every time they want a feature, having to get it in writing and then a signature on it, that's a bit much, isn't it? Like, isn't that a bit much? Like, how do you move forward? And what does that do for you as the reputation of an agency if you are signing off, like you have to sign off on every time you're changing a color to a background, right? That's a bit much. It's a bit much. There's really not, it's not realistic. If you want to get anything done, you can't document everything, every conversation and every feature, everything that the client is asking for. You should have some process, but don't be ridiculous with it from the agency side. Like, you're never going to capture everything. I think more often than not, though, people are probably under documenting than over documenting. But I agree with Rob's point here that I think it's like you gotta trust each other, right? There's got to be an element of trust when you're doing this, and you gain trust through having those conversations and mutual understanding of what the other is doing, right? So I'm always in the mindset of like I have to repeat back everything that the client is saying. I have to repeat it back in my own words. That's how I test my understanding of against what the client or prospect is asking me for. Okay, Matthias. This works really well. Our alignment of customer expectations estimates the project and features, client approval, wireframes, client feedback, design, client feedback, full development sprints. Bring the client to the process. Yeah, I agree with a few things here. Again, um, this method of doing things doesn't account for changes, and there will always be changes in this very narrow way that it's outlined here, right? We're also are I am mindful that we're looking at tweets, which is limited to 140 characters, which means that there isn't a lot of room to write the nuance of how you do things. Even I was struggling to formulate my response here. But there is an element of like rigidity, right, in the development space, that if the agency is too rigid in how in their process of scoping work, it takes too goddamn long, for one, and two, it's just the client is not going to have all the answers that you need. It's a learning thing, right? The client is going to learn as you're building, and they're going to get new information as you're building, and they're going to change things as you're building, and that's going to throw off your development cycle. So this idea of like, we're going to get everything written out, we're going to get everything scoped, and then we're going to build that, and then the client is going to be happy. We're going to build that in 3 months, and then the client is going to be happy. It doesn't work. It never works. They change shit. They don't know. They don't know because things change. They get new information. A new competitor comes out. They learn something about their customers. Ideally, they're still doing customer interviews while you're building, right? They should never stop doing their user interviews. So they're going to change stuff, and I think the formal approach to app and software development, or such a rigid approach to app and software development, does not account for the flexibility needed when new information comes in. I think that's my thought there. Now, I don't disagree with anything that he's saying here, right? Like, all of this stuff has to happen. But I think number 3 is the thing that I have the biggest, not issue with, but just you kind of want to expand on this point. What is like approval? Yes, definitely approval. But it's also how deep is the feature that you're discussing, right? Is this an entire project that you're doing this with? Or is it one feature? Ideally, it's one feature or something very small. You want to get the smallest nugget of development work at a time. That's my goal. I want to get a tiny little bit, a tiny little thing. We do that, we launch it, push it live, let people see it, react to it, make changes. If it's too big, if the scope or the task is too large, we're going to be building for too long. And that's when the changes and the new information that comes in from the client, that's when that becomes a problem. Quite similar to what we have, I guess I need to push back on scope creep, and I'm too nice. I'm actually going to have a chat with Zubair on this, hopefully this week. So I want to get his opinion on this as well, like hear where he's coming from live, in the same way that I'm, thinking about this from my perspective. I'm sure there's, like I say, I'm not the authority on this. It's just I found a way that works for me, and scope creep is no longer really a problem for me. But I want someone else's opinion on why my method wouldn't work for them, or the way that I approach this wouldn't work for them. Scope creep, right? Like, the problem is that the underlying problem here with scope creep is that you're going to scope out an entire project, or too much of a project, And then the client is going to change things. You're going to agree on that. The client's going to approve it. And you're going to get all your ducks in a row, and you're going to start building. And then in an ideal world, that's it. Nothing changes. You build exactly what the client said they wanted, based on their specs, based on what you signed off on. And that's it. And it's beautiful. And everybody's happy. Very rarely happens. But I do agree that you need to push back. If you have set a fixed budget, you do need to push back when the client asks for changes. Not push back. Well, not push back in the way that, like, no, we can't do that. I think having the answer, like, okay, I understand that you want to change something. Well, first off, client, recognize that this is a change. You have to show your client that this change that they're asking for is not going to be simple or fast. It's going to be more work that you didn't originally charge for, or you didn't really estimate for. Right? So you could the pushback there is like, okay, I can do this, yes, but it's going to take me 3 development hours to do it, and this is the cost. And we're setting the timeline back X amount. Now that's annoying for the developer side or the agency side to have to constantly do that. Seemingly simple changes from the client's end put tremendous amount of strain on the budget and the timeline that you had originally promised the client. Which is why I feel that development should never really be estimated, or an entire project should never be estimated in this way from beginning to end, or even too large of a feature. Because if you are micro developing, that's not a term, I just made it up. But if you're developing in such small increments that there's no reason to have to give a timeline for something. It's it's going to just take you like 3 hours, and I'll probably have this done by tomorrow. Like, I never promise more than a day ahead. Now, maybe that speaks to the type of client that I prefer to work with, but I also think it speaks to a different way of the client thinking about this whole development process, and that's something that you as the agency or the developer need to kind of educate them on. It's not a timeline. It's not a budget. It's not an event, right? It's a process. It's an ongoing process. It's going to change constantly. It's got to be a dynamic collaboration between you and I. You as the me as the developer, and you as the client, or whoever is expecting this delivery. There's a dynamic relationship there that we need to understand is going to change over time. All these things that we're talking about and we think are so important today, so goddamn important, we can't do this until we have this one feature. It's going to change, and it's not going to be as important tomorrow. All those things change. How many times have you heard a client say, oh, this is a critical feature, and then you build it, and it's like, oh, we don't need that anymore. Happens constantly. It happens all the time. But saying yes to that point, to Zabir's point here, saying yes on things, just being like, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. That puts the pressure, way too much pressure on the developer, but monetarily, and like, you're putting too much pressure on yourself if you're just agreeing and saying yes to everything the client is asking you to do. So there is a certain degree of boundaries that you need to push back. So definitely agree with that. Quick, take your first instinct and double it. Long, simple things like CRUD are usually 2 times faster than thought. Then try to find what might take longer than estimated design or API calls or getting plugins to work or backend workflows, and some often 3 times slower than thought. Yeah, there's definitely some truth here. I think that as a general rule, like taking your first instinct and doubling it, that could work. I've never thought of it that way. I like to provide a range, even if it's a very small feature. I like to provide a range of hours. Like, all right, you want me to build this chart for example, and you want me to calculate the median price per foot on this property, on these properties, on the list of properties, I'd probably estimate like it's going to take me like 2 to 4 hours of development, right? But that's it. That's all I'm agreeing to at that point, right? Like it's not the whole kit and caboodle, right? It's not everything. Now you may be asking, like, how do you start with that, right? Because when a client comes to you or a prospect comes to you, they want the first question is going to be, hey, here's everything that I could possibly want in this app. How much and how long is it going to take? That's the wrong question. And that's the bigger point here, right? With that, if you deliver the answer to that question, you're already on your heels. You've already kind of agreed that this thing does have a timeline and a fixed cost if you answer that question. Even if you say like, oh, let me get back to you, and you take 3 days to budget out what you think this is going to cost, it never works. Because you really don't know how long things are going to take until you start building. And it's feature by feature, thing by thing, little tiny micro things that's really what you want to be estimating, not an entire functionality, major functionality all the way through. All right? So I even say don't even try to estimate an entire functionality all the way through, much less a project. But there are things that you are extremely comfortable with. Like everyone has their own specialty of an area that they are comfortable with. I particularly am comfortable with APIs. I can do API integrations. I understand how to work with different endpoints. I know that it's how long it's going to take me. Whereas somebody that is more comfortable in design, they may look at I look at design kind of like I don't know how long it's going to take me. That scares me, right? That kind of puts the fear in me when somebody says they need design work done, right? I don't feel confident in that skill set, so I probably will estimate more hours for that. But if they come to me with an API integration, I may go lower on the lower end. Right? So everyone I think has their own kind of area that they're very comfortable with that you may be closer to estimating out. But even if that's the case, I still say make sure that the estimates that you're giving are for very small features, very small commitments. Small and then start small and then build big. Seems similar to mine. I used to overcomplicate it by trying to break everything down into distinct things that provided just to be wrong as instinct and times 3. Okay. Yeah, like breaking it down. There's no budget, right? Like when I say break it down, I don't mean like we need to figure out how long this entire, feature is going to take at the beginning. No, it's the way that, well, you know what? I'll get to that in a second. Don't bother, just charge by the hour. It's impossible to estimate dev time. There are always unknowns and will make most estimates inaccurate. Yeah, I agree. 100%, Tanaka. I agree. Am I following Tanaka? I am. I don't think there's a real way to an accurate way to estimate development time. An accurate and efficient, I should say too. I don't think there is. I just don't. Even large agencies that seemingly have this very robust process, there's always going to be snags. There's always going to be changes. It's human nature. It's the nature of this thing. All right, Nigel. Nigel has been in the game for a long time, and I'm interested in what he has to say here. Here are my condensed thoughts. Based on attempting to do this as my job since the 1980s and using pretty much every method known. DSDM, Spiral, Agile, Lean, Scrum, Incremental, Waterfall, RAD, RUP. I know what very few of these things are. I've heard of Agile and Scrum. I don't know what Waterfall is or RAD or RUP. And pretty much failing every time. But this tells you something. This dude has so much experience. Nigel has a ton of experience. He's been in the game forever. And even he's saying that all of these methods fail on some level. Let's open this thread up. See what we got here. Accurately estimate is impossible at any degree of scale. Correct. I think this is the key point here. Any degree of scale. No matter how you try. I basically had a euro. A euro? That's a euro sign, right? Basically $1 these days. Oh yeah, euro and the dollar are the same thing. For every time I've heard this, if I had a euro, for every time I heard this time we're gonna really nail down the requirements. I would be rich. Accept this and you're doing good. Right? He's saying that like if he had a dollar for every time somebody was confident in their ability to nail down the requirements and build that in the timeline that was set forth from the beginning, he'd be a rich man. Clients won't usually accept. So you need some very high level estimate, or at least one with a plus minus in there, forcing them to sign off on detailed requirements as a recipe for pain. Right. Because they're going to change. Detailed requirements, they're not going to read it, first off. They're not going to read the detailed requirements. So even if you want to go back and have your little contract that you've set up that outlines every little detail down to the, down to the color of your elements. If you want to do that, and then you can say like, oh, well, you said this. Even if you just want to be able to point the finger and say, no, we didn't agree to this, right? I'm talking about large scale here, right? The whole project. What does that do? Yes, it provides you a defense for, no, you said you wanted this, so now we need to do a change order. But it just slows everything down. They're not going to read it in detail. Almost guarantee they're not going to read the specs in detail. Your clients, I'm talking about. The specs that you lay out for them. And even if they do, sure, you may have a very pretty document that you can feel comfortable building, but it's going to change. There's going to be changes. Try to document high-level statements about what you need and will not be doing. This is important. I've seen some people do this where they document what's not included. I do think that's important. You would think high-level statements about an app's features would be a bad thing, right? Because there's a lot of room for interpretation there, and you think that might be bad. But I think that's actually better than being too precise. For that exact reason, it is open to interpretation. I don't know. I've had it go both ways. I'm not sure. These should be as universal as you can get, things you can come back to later, and at least you agreed at some point. Base the rough order of magnitude on this. We used to call this rooming, I guess. It's just a guess, but it gets you in the same ballpark. Same ballpark, good. If not, stop, go back and talk. Next level of order of magnitude estimates, means go through and pull the high-level features you think you need to build. T-shirt size them as a team. 30-second talk about the feature, then vote. I have seen no evidence that the Fibonacci, etc., are any more accurate than a simple size estimate. Everything is XXL, then go back to round quickly. Okay, so just to break this down a little bit, I think what the analogy that he's making in terms of t-shirt sizes, it's like, is this the feature, right? The size of the feature. Is this a small feature or small feature request? Is this a medium, large, XXL? And then you can start to build a priority list based on those features. And I definitely do this. I definitely agree with this, in that there is a, if they're throwing the kitchen sink at you with all the features that they want, I think there definitely is okay, I need to give my input here as the developer to say, all right, this is a big one. We're going to have to allocate significant development resources to this particular feature. How important is this? How important is this how critical is this to the demonstration of what problem you're solving for people with this app? If the answer is it's not that important, then we should push this down the priority list, right? But getting a mental, going back and forth with the client on how big the feature is from a technical standpoint, and also how important it is from their perspective, that coming to that agreement is very important. Now, I think what Nigel's saying here is if everything is XXL, if everything is, everything, we need everything is critical, you have to go back to the drawing board here. Speed is key, absolutely key. Thin slicing the feature is probably as accurate as hours of analysis. I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means. Speed is key here, absolutely. Thin slicing the feature is probably as accurate as hours of analysis. I'm not sure if that means it is accurate or it isn't accurate. I'm not sure. Crack it in one sitting. I think also if there's more than 5 features, that are extremely high priority, you have to really dig into, push back on what they're asking for a little bit. There should be more than 5 features to start with, right? And then of those 5 features, we should be able to prioritize from there, right? The top 5 things that you would need this app to do. And I'm talking okay, login functionality. I'm talking, if we're doing a job board, the ability to create a profile, the ability for a company to set up their side, right? So we have a job seeker side and a company side. Again, just using this analogy of a job board. Those are features. Those are features right there. And within those features, there's a lot of details, right? So those 3 already, right? We're already at 3. And these are the very basics of what this app is going to do. Split features into sprints you are comfortable with. I prefer Kanban cycle times, but that needs an experienced team. I don't know what this means. Kanban cycle. A week or 2, not 4. Add in a sprint 0 at the start. Have a look at inception decks for templates. Now you have a rough timeline. So you can estimate, I guess he means it. I'm not sure. I think the sprint should be a week or 2, right? That's the idea here. The sprint in the way that you break this up should be no longer than 2 weeks, is what he's saying. Note at this stage, you're not talking to the client about prioritization, just what order the team might prefer to do it in. I've seen no particular value in user stories over some very basic statements. They're a lot harder than people think. That's an interesting, that's a hot take. People usually rave about the user stories and how important they are. I kind of agree that I don't know that I've ever understood what the client wanted any better from a user story. I kind of agree with that. Now do a plus minus on whatever the time scale is. This assumes that there will always be things the client doesn't really need and things they will have forgotten. Create your feature list no prioritizations, or Moscow. Nigel, I have no idea what any of these. I need to educate myself on what these acronyms are. What the hell is a Moscow? Or any other PM woo there. The thing at the top of the list is most important. Now sprints Kanban your way through the list. You almost certainly don't need anything like Scrum. Each sprint do a rough wireframe of the feature, develop it, test it, release. Oh God, there's more. All right, so I mean, I think there's a lot of good there's a lot of good information in Nigel's thread here. But even the thread is long. Even the thread is daunting because there's so many steps to this and there's so much stuff to remember. I have to think there's a quicker way or a more efficient way to approach this. Plan in a turn and burn, architectural point in a few sprints. Technical architecture is an emergent property, but yes, do some start. Don't just do big model upfront stuff. What is turn and burn? Turn and burn allows you to check if what you have learned so far validates your architecture before it's too late. No regrets. Decision point. This can save you a huge amount of time later on. Don't ever think your speed per sprint. This is not a mathematical process. Some sprints are fast, others are slow and painful. Just get comfortable that you can keep going at a particular place in the medium term. Be ruthless with clients in terms of management of the list of things to be done. But be kind when it comes to changes, even if they're late in the day. And just keep going like this until it's either done, which it won't be. That's a great point there. It never is really done. Or done enough within budget. Again, a lot of useful information there, but it's scary, right? It requires so much. So much so that you need 10 tweets to summarize this process. Right, and that's intimidating, I think, especially for new freelancers and new agencies that are trying to be a little bit more agile, right? Not in the dev way, but it's like, Jesus, how would I ever start? It doesn't seem like the project ever gets started here. It's the feeling, right? It may not be. It's just the feeling. All right, Anchor. Not the right person to ask. I recently did a project and failed miserably at estimating its timeline. Freelancing is not my cup of tea, so I am no longer doing it. I wonder why. Anchor there felt like freelancing was not his cup of tea. And why he felt like he failed miserably at it. I'd be curious to know what he considers. Why was this a failure? Was the client unhappy? Did you do way more work than you were paid for? How did you start too? Like, did you try to estimate the entire project from the beginning? That's what I did in the beginning. That's what most of us do in the beginning because that's what the clients or the prospect is asking for and expecting. They think it's like, I think the prospects or clients that don't have any technical background think it's, oh, this person is an expert. They know what they're doing and they know exactly how long this could take, right? Even a ballpark, right? They know how long this is going to take, how many development hours this is going to take. But one little change, seemingly small change can throw off the entire timeline. Don't beat yourself up. It's pretty much impossible to do in advance with any degree of accuracy. Size out sprints based on nicely separated features. T-shirt sizing is a good technique. I agree. I like the T-shirt sizing technique. I agree with that. Amen. Not limited to bubble or no code. Every freelancer, agency, contractor fights the same battle. Eventually, you'll find the sweet spot that works for you, but it takes time. Better to have a buffer that covers scope creep and overages versus building at a project loss. Yeah, I've definitely done that. Building at a project loss. And the worst feeling is when you just feel like you're trapped in a project because you agreed to do this for the entire project for $5,000, and you well exceeded the hours that expected it was going to take you, and you're still working on it, and it just feels like you're never going to get out. Feeling trapped in a project is probably one of the worst feelings when in software or development world. You're just trapped. It seems like it's never going to end, and the client's never going to be happy, and that's when you kind of wonder, like, is this really worth it? Is this worth it? It's a shitty feeling. I saw something recently that said your honest timeline is the estimate times 3.14 because you're going to run a circle around it. That's clever. Might adopt it. Three times is excessive. 2 times is good practice. I'm currently at 1.5 times. Estimating hours for clients to see is a trap, in my opinion, for coming from the agency world. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a trap. Agree, but you got to set some range to set expectations. I don't know if I agree with this. I don't know. I think if the expectation is that we're going to start seeing progress from day one, right? You're going to see progress. You're going to see what I'm building. You're going to be involved with what I'm building. We are working collaboratively to build this software together. The timeline becomes less important. So I don't think you do, like, I think it the idea that to set a timeline, is a convention that we need to get out of the habit of doing, to set a timeline for this kind of stuff. Never got this right. As a basic start, I multiply what I think by 3 as I woefully underestimate. So it seems like a lot of people use these multipliers as a way, like, all right, I think this is going to take me 3 hours, multiply that by 3, and that's the estimate that you give the client. It's really going to take me 9. You can use PERT minus 3 plus critical chain light. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? To manage in a more realistic way. PERT minus 3, average time is equal to 1 times the most optimal time, plus 4 times the most likely time, plus 1 times, all divided by 6.5. That is incredibly confusing. The critical chain light. Sum the most pessimistic time minus the sum of the sum multiplied by the average time divided by 2. There's a formula. There's a formula. Critical chain light. This is a real thing? Critical chain project management combines the insights into both the nature of uncertainty and human behavior to result in significant improvements in project performance. Jesus. I don't even know where to begin with that one. If you go faster on the next task, you exit the heat buffer. Below 25%, your heat buffer, it's okay. Below 50%, your heat buffer, things are getting hot. Above 50% of your heat buffer, call the fireman. This is how I feel right now. I should have concentrated better in math. I mean, if you have to do an equation for every feature that you're building, like how long is it going to take you to make that estimate? All right, this was my response, and I want to try to break this down to a little more nuance. Educate the client that dev is a process, not events. So this question of or this thing that we feel like we have to do of providing an estimate to a client comes from the expectation that there is a timeline and a budget that we're going to be working on to build this project. Now, I know that is the convention. I know that is the thing, like what a client wants to know, how much and how long is this going to take? But I don't think that that is a good, sets the right expectations in any context for this type of work, especially if the project is exploratory, and most of them are. And when I say exploratory, I mean you don't know, there isn't an existing solution to what you're or a comparable solution to what you're building. And that can be, a startup idea, that can be an internal business tool. You don't know how the users of this intended application are going to really use and respond to what you're giving them. So why is it that we feel the need to budget out, or why is it that we feel so confident in our assumptions to accurately predict how someone is going to use our software? Why do we need this budget? Why do we need this timeline? If we start building straight away and let the users guide what we build, the timeline is not important anymore. The budget is not important anymore. We're learning and we're seeing if this thing even worthwhile to build. And we can do that in the first 10 to 20 development hours. All right, so the education, this part is important, right? This is like probably the most time-consuming part, in that you are retraining the client how to think about this. It's a journey, right? It's something that you're going. It's learning. It's not an event. It's not when is my app going to be ready. Your app could be ready tomorrow. Depends what you're comfortable putting in front of your users. And bringing that comfortability down to a lower expectation, I think, is how fast this is going to go. Isolate the highest priority specs, right? So you definitely need to prioritize what the client is asking for. A 10-hour block of work to start, right? This is just the start. I'm also thinking about this from a very narrow context, right? I don't know the person that is coming to me with this app idea, right? They don't know me. I don't know them. How are we going to build trust with each other? We're going to build trust by doing what we say we're going to do. So are we to commit to a $50,000 6-month contract based on how I look? Based on some past project that I've done? I may hate this person. I may hate working with them. They may hate me. And we're in contract for 6 months to build this giant app? No! I don't want to do that. I don't want to be locked into that. And I don't want to ask someone to be locked into that with me if they don't like the work that I'm doing. If you agree to something small and say, hey, what's your first, we've identified your priority, right? The priorities were the last option. You need design? All right, let's spend 10 hours on this design and see what we come up with. 10 hours. We do that. We build that. We have a navigatable user interface that with 3 or 4 different views. That's something that you can already put in front of users. If they can click through it and you can capture how they're using the app, even at that just click through rate, this doesn't even have to be in Bubble. This doesn't need to be developed. This could be done in Figma. But we've worked through those first 10 hours together. You have something that you can put in front of your users. You have something that they can react to. And think about how much you have. Think about how much you've learned through that process. You've learned, first off, whether you and I even like working with each other. You've gotten some feedback from users. And you have a user interface. The first iteration of a user interface. And that was in the first 10 hours. of working together. And then delivering as much as possible within the first 10 dev hours. Those first 10 development hours I find to be very important for building trust, right? So over deliver, right? Even if you feel like you're losing out in the first, the first 10, over deliver. Over deliver on that first 10, on those first 10 hours. Show the client that you care enough to deliver something beautiful and that you understand the problem that they're solving. Understand their app idea. Understand their business. That is the thing that separates you as you're not just a developer at that point. You're a consultant, you're a product manager, development is one component of what you do, but you're more than that. You think that once you demonstrate that, the client is going to want to go to someone else? Fuck no. Of course they're going to want to stick with you. They're going to want to do everything with you because they trust you. So over deliver in those first 10 hours. That is my motto. That's what I do. And then the process continues. It's a cycle, right? So then you keep doing this. First 10 hours we got the user interface done. Sweet. Was it so important of how fast that happened? No. Because I did it in like maybe 3 days. It took me 3 days, and you already have something tangible that you can show to people. The client's going to be happy. They're going to be happy with that. Then you can move on to the next level functionality, right? Start actually building the development part. Build the login system. If we're using the analogy of that might be, I don't know, 2 hours. It's not hard to build a login. We all know how to do that. Building a login system. Building the profile system, that might be another 10 hours. So this perpetual kind of ongoing basis, right? This ongoing basis where you're working on the hours. Now I've railed against hours in the past, and I'm aware of that. So I feel a little bit hypocritical doing a complete 180 here. But it really has become, a combination of doing the block methodology, right? The block of being 10 hours and seeing how much progress we can make in those 10 hours. Right? You don't feel overly committed to a giant project as the developer, and the client doesn't feel like they're married to you if they don't want to continue working with you, but they still see progress. They're still seeing progress. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I hear from clients is that they want to see progress. Once they see that you're not dicking around, you're not just taking their money, they just want to see progress. And if you can show them that, they're going to be less concerned with timelines because they're going to see exactly what you're doing. They know what you're working on. I think the biggest reason that they ask, like, how long is this going to take is because the traditional way that people develop is like, all right, give me your specs. I'll see you in 3 months with an app. No input. No input. The client's in the dark. That's no good. Thank you, Nigel. All right, so interesting, although it feels simple. Figma, Bubble front end, Bubble back end, API integration, PM are quite varied and different people in our situation. How do you handle design and UI? Custom, make the design every time, use a library. It makes what task or what area of development that you're working on less important because you're just going by the number of hours that the client has agreed, that we've agreed on so far. It's not a huge commitment yet, right? So it does, like, I don't distinguish my UI time from my API integration time. It's the same amount of time, right? I'm just not the same amount of time. Like, different things will take longer or shorter amounts of time, but I'm charging the same amount for UI design and API integrations. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's still my time that I'm selling. All right, I think that's the end of it. I think that's the end of the that post, the comments there. And I think that I've definitely formed this opinion over working with different clients in different situations. This may, like I say, this may very well be limited to the way that I prefer to work. I prefer to have these long-term engagements with clients where I really don't have to be searching for, new clients, new personalities, starting a new project. Now, if your thing is to kind of go and start a new project every couple of months, that might be your thing, and this way of working may not work for you. But I prefer to have, like, be a trusted advisor to the clients that I work with, in the sense that there's no end to the work. The project is never done unless the client just says, "Look, I'm not really interested in building this anymore." Then the project is never done. There's always going to be another feature to build, and if they trust you, they're always going to go to you. They're going to want to work with you. You think they're going to want to explain this shit to somebody else? No way. Absolutely not. So this long-term kind of ongoing project work that I prefer to do, I'm speaking from that frame of mind. So if you're in that same boat where you're like trying to get clients for the long term and just have them keep, paying you to build more and more features, then like there's no reason not to do an hourly, thing, an hourly ongoing basis. There's no estimation to be done. You can start with the client as a lot quicker. Understanding the priorities, I think, takes the longest time, and trying to tease out what's important to this app idea. That probably is the most time consuming part of it. But also it helps you make better decisions as the developer. If you understand the larger picture of what your client is building, it helps you make smart development choices. Um, so that's that. Again, those are the engagements that I like to do, and that's really my thought, and the way that I have enjoyed working with clients. Right. So going back to kind of Anchor's comments of he failed miserably and he's not really his thing. I would ask why. Why did you think that, or why did you feel that way, and what approach did you take? How many clients did you take? Because it's taken me a long time to find clients that I actually want to work with in a way that makes sense for both sides. So that is what it is. All right, people. That's my thoughts for the day. I'm gonna check back in tomorrow. I'll be there 1 p.m. I'm going to be doing Mondays and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and possibly Fridays at 1 p.m. Eastern. So check me out. I have a new topic for tomorrow related to Bubble, no code, and general freelancing for development work, and just like general app stuff. I like talking about this. All right, so I'll catch you tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.